So today we have David Endean, Private First Class Army. You joined the military September 25th, 1968, and you came out in 1970, is that correct?
September 25th, 1970.
September 25th, 1970. You did basic training at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. You did advanced infantry training at Fort Lewis, Washington, right?
Correct.
Yes. And then you went to Vietnam March 3rd of 1969 for a whole year.
Yes.
And you went to Fort Carson after that.
Yes. For the remaining part of my tour.
Okay. How long was that?
Just under 5 months, 6 months.
Okay, that's right. You did the 2-year enlistment, right?
Right.
Okay.
Regular Army.
Regular Army. You worked at the Great Lakes Naval Base?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And then you attended tech school in 1972 to become an electrical engineer in Chicago, right?
Yes, roughly about that time frame. It was DeVry Institute of Technology, and I got a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering. Then I went to work for numerous computer companies.
Nice. So we were talking a little bit earlier, and you had said your father was a Pearl Harbor World War II veteran. How did he feel about you joining the military?
At first, I think he was a little bit apprehensive. Mm-hmm. We really didn't discuss it that much. It was just something that I felt an obligation to our country to serve. And certainly at that time, with the Vietnam War escalating like it was, I think down deep, both my mother and father were very frightened, especially not knowing exactly where I was going to be deployed after I went through training and that. But I did get orders to Vietnam. In February of 1969, I went home for, I believe it was 2 weeks. And then I flew from Chicago to Oakland. And from Oakland, we left on a very long flight up through Alaska, down into the Philippines, and then I landed in Benoit, the Tan Son Nhut Air Base and that, which is right outside of Saigon.
Wow.
And that happened on March 3rd, 1969. I arrived in country.
Wow. Was that a culture shock?
It was an experience that's very difficult to share and try to understand, but the plane was extremely quiet the whole trip. I think we were in the plane probably close to 15, 16 hours. And when we were coming in to land, it was dark, and you could see explosions and that in the area that we were landing. And once we got on the ground and that, and the plane was secured, and they opened the doors up, and that the heat was just enormous, the humidity. And that started my time in Vietnam.
Wow. Wow. All right.
And I should say, once we landed, we went into a staging area. Mm-hmm. And they put you through 5 days of in-country training to get you adapted somewhat in 5 days. And they went through, what to expect in the field, talking about booby traps and the villagers and, what your life's going to be for the next 12 months, providing you made the 12 months. And I can still remember sitting in these little bleachers, and the instructor was up there saying, you guys got to really pay attention to what we're talking about, because it's a life and death situation that you're going to be going through. And he said, especially if you go to the 25th Infantry Division, the 1st of the 27th or 2nd of the 27th Wolfhounds, because your life expectancy is 10 days. And I went, wow, 10 days. And I had shipped over with 2 other guys. His name was Bill Dolan and Bob Coatney. And we got assigned, we went through basic training, AIT together, went to Vietnam, and went to the same division, went to the 1st of the 27th Wolfhounds, went to the same company, and the same platoon.
Wow. All
3 of us. And after the 5 days of the indoctrination to Vietnam, we got assigned to the 1st of the 27th Wolfhounds, and we took a C-130 up to Dao Tang, I believe it was. Yeah, it was Dao Tang. And when we landed, we got off, and they said, you're going to go over to the 1st platoon. So we went over to the 1st platoon. They had these hooches and we asked a couple guys, where's the 1st platoon? And they said, it's right over there. And we opened up the door, and there was a guy, and he had bandages all over him. And we said, we're here to report to the 1st platoon. And they said, is this it? And he said, yes, this is it. And I said, well, where is everyone? He says, I'm the 1st platoon.
So it's just you and a couple other guys, that was it?
He was the only survivor.
Oh, wow.
They got mortared 2 nights before and lost everybody. So that was a real wake-up call. So.
Wow. Was there any sort of leadership while you were out there that stood out to you? Good leadership that to this day has made an impact on your life?
Well, I would have to say one guy stood out. We had lieutenants, and you know, they came basically from we called them the 90-day wonders, the shake and bakes. And you know, when they got in country, they basically were taking what they were taught in their training and thinking it was going to be able to apply to their day-to-day, you know, experience in Vietnam. Well, that was totally 180 degrees out of whack, because until you experience it, what looks good on a chalkboard doesn't apply to the real world. And I went through a number of lieutenants and that because of poor leadership, I shouldn't really say poor leadership, they just did not understand, and they thought that this was the way it should be, and they were dusted off.
Wow.
They were injured, and some I don't know whatever happened to them. But there was 2 people that stood out. One was a gentleman by the name of Charles Rock Green. He was we called them lifers. He was in World War II, he was in Korea, and he was in Vietnam.
Wow.
When he was in Vietnam, he was, I think, 43 or 44 years old. And when he got assigned to our platoon, we were somewhat disorganized. We never really had any good leadership, and he kind of opened his wings and said, this is how it's going to be. This is how we're going to get through this together. And he pulled the platoon together. And we became really a strong fighting unit.
Yeah.
And whenever there was things that the company was assigned to do, they always looked to the 1st platoon to be the spearhead. So we were the ones out in the front. And unfortunately, we lost Rock one night. And it was not a pleasant experience. They got overrun, and the next morning they got them out, and they came in, and the VC threw a lot of grenades and that into the area, and he lost most of his right heel. And there was this young man who was just assigned to the platoon, and Rock didn't have time to assign him to a squad, so he said, "No, you'll stay with the CP group tonight," and that. And when they got overrun, he got hit really bad too, and first night out on ambush, and he died.
Wow.
And it was very, very sad. And we, the platoon really took a hurt. We were mad. So we continued though and did our best.
Yeah.
And we did, when I fast forward, when we got out, probably, I don't know how many years later, there was communication that the 1st platoon was having a reunion, and we were meeting in Indianapolis, and that's where Charles Rock Green was. So we had reunions there probably. They still do have them, but Rock passed away probably about, I'd say 12 years ago. But we'd always go up there and see him and that. He was a real nice man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's a lot of things in between. But another guy that stands out was Lieutenant Robert Putnam. He was one of the shake and bake lieutenants and that came out, but he really had a good head on his shoulders, and that he looked to us as, you know, maybe I should learn from these guys instead of going by a textbook. Let's see what these guys. And I'd been in country, I think, 8 months then, and I was carrying the radio, and we developed a good camaraderie. And unfortunately, again, he got hit, and we lost him. But I found him like 30 years later, and to this day we stay in touch. In fact, yesterday we talked on the phone. He lives in Sun City.
Nice.
And we see one another, and that was heartwarming.
Yeah.
To have that experience.
How long had it been since you guys seen each other?
Probably 30 years.
Wow. Was it just like picking off where you left off as soon as you guys saw each other?
It was kind of that way. He was, we got into a situation that we were out on a search and destroy mission, and I got buzzed and called, and they said we have to get to such and such coordinates. We're getting picked up, and they need to get us over to this other area. So an Eagle flight came in, and we all got on board, went to this other location, and it was not a pleasant scene because they had what they referred to as a Chu Hoi. That was a VC that surrendered to the American forces. And they wanted us to go into this hedgerow, and the VC, he said, no, buku, booby traps. Buku, booby traps. And we had about 4 or 5 new kids, or new guys, that, had been wanting to get into contact. And I kept telling them, you don't want to do, that'll happen. Don't rush this. Well, when we were ordered to go in from the guy flying the Loach up in the air, Putnam normally would walk second and I'd be third. And I said, I feel really bad about this. This is not good. And I said, you got to walk maybe 5th and I'll be 6th. And he agreed. And probably 5 minutes into that hedgerow, the point man tripped a booby trap and blew everybody away in front of me. So those other 4 guys, they didn't know what happened. They just were gone. Put them on medevacs, and then I really felt bad about Putnam, not knowing where he was and whatever happened to him. But I ran into a guy with the 25th Infantry via our social media, who lives out in California, and Merrill was able to track Putnam down. So I made a phone call, and he couldn't believe it. So that's how we hooked up again.
Nice.
And we've been in touch ever since.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, I believe it. Do you recall any humorous or funny events that happened while you were in the military that you would like to speak about? Or even while you were in Vietnam, anything that was funny that you can recall, that's a story you like to tell people?
Well, war isn't funny by any means.
No.
Was there humor? Yeah, there was some humor. You had to have some. But you had to always be on guard. And if you weren't, you could get yourself in some trouble. Or you could get your buddies in trouble, and you didn't want that. But one humorous situation was the 2 other gentlemen that I talked about earlier, Bill Dolan and Bob Coatney, and I, after 8 months, we put in for a leave. So we got the okay to go on leave. It was a 5-day leave. And we'll just cut to the chase, because we got on a plane that took us into Saigon, and we were told that, since you're on leave, you're in the back of the line to get on planes. It's guys that are on R&R that are going to get their choices to where they want to go. So I suggested, well, why do we want to waste our time here? Let's just go over to the international airport in Saigon and pay for a ticket. And we all agreed, and so we went over we got off the plane, and you see all these other guys going this way, and 3 of us go that way, and we got on a plane to go to Taiwan. We didn't know where it was. We just picked a place and said, let's go to Taiwan. So we went to Taiwan for 5 days, and as we were supposed to be coming back, and we had just gotten promoted to specialists, Spec 4s. And when our time was up, we were back at the airport in Taiwan, and Taipei actually, and we're standing in line, and I remember turning to Bill and Bob, and I said, how much money do we have left? And we had about $300 left. And I said, why are we going back to Vietnam? Let's go spend the money, and then we'll come back. So we were literally like 3 days AWOL. That did not go well with the first sergeant.
I bet.
And he decided that he would make us PFCs for the rest of our tour. So I can still remember seeing this captain that was standing behind, I think, Bob Coatney, and he looked at us and said, "You guys can't do that." And I said, "Well, what are they going to do to us? Send us to Vietnam?" So we came back, and the sad situation about that is when we came back, my friend Bill Dolan had a mental breakdown. He lost it because when we were in Taipei, Taipei, they took an AK-47 round from him because when we first got in country and got in a firefight, and one of the dead VCs, he took an AK-47 round from him, and he kept it, and he said, "This was the bullet that was meant for me. They're not going to kill me." But then when they took that away from him when he was in, that was his, I hate to say it, like a security blanket for a baby.
Yeah.
And he couldn't, and he had a mental breakdown, and I can still see him walking out of that fire base Mahone, and he just said, "I can't do it anymore, David." So he went through a lot of problems, and to this day we stay in touch. He lives by himself in Star City, Indiana, on a tributary of the Ticonderoga River, but he's kind of like a hermit.
Doesn't come out or anything?
Very seldom.
Wow. You guys talk very often, or?
I try to talk to him at least once every 2 weeks.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
But he's a very injured person psychologically. It takes a toll on you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah. Whew, it was really difficult. And it hurt me too, because now I lost my buddy that I
Yeah.
was with.
And it's kind of like you don't know that person anymore. It's a different person than what you remember.
Yeah. I remember seeing him in that, and he was, because when it happened, he went into, I believe it was Cu Chi, and I was able to go down to see him. And I remember he had a Bible in this, and he just had a stare of nowhere. He was just staring into the sky.
The 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah, yeah. So, but he's okay
Yeah.
in his own world now. But I do talk to him at least every 2 weeks.
That's good.
Yeah. So.
So, do you recall when you got out of the military, and what was it like for you? I know for a lot of guys, myself included, when I got out, we would just feel like we're in limbo. We don't belong anywhere. It's hard to get back into the swing of things. Like, what was it like for you?
Quite honestly, I was just so happy to be home. Mm-hmm. Backtrack, I think 2 months maybe before I came home. I was engaged before I left for Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And 2 months prior to it, I didn't really get a Dear John, but basically, I guess the relation. But when I landed in that, I was just so happy to be home that that didn't even bother me. And I think in retrospect, looking back, no one wanted to talk about our experiences. They were, like, "Oh my God, that guy's got leprosy or something." They didn't know how to, and that includes my parents.
Oh, wow.
To this day, my mom and dad really didn't talk to me about it, and that they were
just happy you were home?
They were happy I was home, but I don't know if it was my father's experience when he was in the Navy, and he knew not to tread in some areas, but it would have been nice if someone would have said, "What happened, David?"
Yeah.
They knew I got a Purple Heart. I was hit twice. Mm-hmm. And they also knew I received a Bronze Star for Valor. because it was in the local newspapers, but they never ever talked about it.
Wow.
And even a lot, my brother was in the Air Force. We talked a little bit, but nothing in great detail. But that's okay. I've learned to live with it. And
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine that I went through grade school, high school, 6 months of college, and he went overseas first, and he got assigned to the 25th Infantry Division also. And when he found out I was coming over, he prayed. He said to his mother in writing, he said, "Boy, I sure hope Skip doesn't get assigned to the 1st of the 27th Wolfhounds." And when he found out I did, he was just like beside himself. And we stay in touch every week. We talk to one another and that. But he knows, people that have been there, they know it.
Yeah.
They know what it's about. But unfortunately, other people, they don't ask questions, and they just steer away from it to this day, basically. So.
Yeah, I understand that sometimes it's different depending on what era veteran. Sometimes it's just easier to talk to someone that's been there and done the same as you than someone, let's say like me, that's been different era veteran. Sometimes it makes it a little harder, but sometimes the same.
Yeah. I think in retrospect, I'd like to just say this.
Yeah.
Going back to my time in Vietnam, the environment that you go through, the weather conditions, the insects, the mosquitoes. I mean, constant buzzing at night. You don't sleep. You're on ambush and that. And you got these little critters crawling on you and that at night. And so many of us, they can't even comprehend it, what it would be like. And that sticks with you. There's certain things that trigger the sound of a helicopter. The smell of dead roadkill. If you get that, you drive by something that's been laying there in the hot sun, that's like a human body. And those things are just tattooed into your brain. They'll never ever leave you. And I think that's something that it's hard to understand, but until you experience it, and then the only people that can understand it are those that have been there and done it. And they say, yeah, we know that. Imagine eating food. I was born in 1948. I was eating sea rations that were dated 1948. I was in Vietnam in 1968. That's how old the food was that they gave us.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
But God was with me. God walked. He walked every step, because the other thing I'd like to just share is, if people want to get a feel, and it's difficult to really get it, but try going to work one day and have a backpack that's 70 pounds. And you have to walk around all day long with that. With the idea that at any given time, you could step on a booby trap, or an ambush would be pulled on you. Try to handle that for a year. That's pretty intense.
Yes, sir, it is. So you went to school for electrical engineering. Let's talk a little bit about after the military.
Sure.
What did that lead you to? Down what path, career-wise?
Well, from a career standpoint, after I did 3 years of school, which equated to a 4-year degree because I went constantly, and it was in Chicago. And I got a degree in electronics engineering, which led me down the path of computers. And back in, when I graduated, it was 1975. The computer industry was in its infant stages, basically. Certainly nothing like what we're experiencing today.
Yeah.
But it was a good opportunity that opened up a lot of good, career doors for me in that. And I started off as a serviceman, servicing computers and that. And then I went into account management, and then I went into sales.
Oh.
So I kind of covered the whole gamut. And, being in sales, after having the experience of servicing and account managing, you have a better appreciation of what the real tools that you need to sell equipment and how it benefits people. So I have no regrets. But it was a good career, and I met my wife, and we got married in 1972, August 12th. Our honeymoon consisted of one night stay at the Hilton at O'Hare Airport, because the Monday after our wedding, I had to go back to school and she had to go back to work.
Wow.
So we really never had a honeymoon. So, but it's been a honeymoon for 53 years. So.
Yeah, I think that's a little more worth it than no honeymoon.
Oh, yeah.
If 53 years has been a honeymoon, that's great.
Right.
I'm a little jealous.
I must share with you, though, that 53 years is a lifetime for some people. But in those 53 years, there's been some ups and downs. And easily she could have said, hey, I'm going to leave this guy, because she's seen me in some very bad situations. And she stood by me. And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be here right now. She's the angel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Is there anything that you took from the military that helped you in your life later on? Anything like discipline, anything like that? That was a major driving factor for the rest of your life that you learned?
Well, growing up back in the, the 50s and 60s, it's certainly different than what people from the 80s, 90s, and where we're at today. It's just my personal opinion. The military gave me discipline, respect for other people, commitment, and I got to say this: it brought me closer to God, because of the experiences that anyone in combat would go through. Mm-hmm. There's that old saying that there is never an atheist in a foxhole, and
Very
I believe
true.
that.
I actually had an atheist tell me that's what made them convert. So yeah.
So those are things that have helped me. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
That's a tough question, because I think a lot of people take veterans, unfortunately, for granted. And, going back to the Vietnam War, that was the first war that was televised to the United States from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock every night.
Yeah.
And it was always about body counts and this and that. And I think in my involvement with the DAV when I got back, I did not immediately when we located to Orlando, I got involved with the Disabled American Veterans Chapter 16, and came close to knowing two past presidents of the DAV. One gentleman is Jim Sursley, and the other one was, what was his name, Jude?
Jim.
Sursley and
Dennis Joyner.
Dennis Joyner. And those two guys were triple amputees from Vietnam.
Wow.
Yeah. So I forgot your question. I kind of digressed. I went
It was,
backwards.
what do you wish people knew more about veterans?
Just that I wish they would show, I think they've learned from the Vietnam veteran to appreciate what the men and women that have dedicated their lives to whatever time frame, be it a career or a 4-year term, or what they have committed to give you the freedom and the right to do what you want here in this wonderful country, the United States. And I wish more people would show that to the guys in that, because it is a commitment. And if it wasn't for them, I personally believe you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking right now. It'd be a different world. And we have to continue down this road of making the United States great again.
I agree. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
No, I just, thank you for the opportunity to share some of my experiences, because I think we could sit here for hours and talk about stuff, but
Yeah.
it's just been a good run so far. I kind of just, I'll leave you with this thought, that if you've never been to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., I would strongly recommend sometime to go there. It took me, I think it was close to 35, 40 years before I could even bring myself to seeing it.
I believe that.
And that's just a small amount, 58,428 names sitting on that wall. But there's a lot of walking wounded too, that have scars.
I agree. Well, I want to say thank you for sharing some of your stories with me, and 100% thank you for your service. I really enjoyed doing this interview, and it was definitely an honor to talk to you.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.